evening and welcome to Business and Enterprise, your only online business programme going to 203 countries worldwide and well over 1 million viewers. Well, this week I'm in the hot seat, and the real reason is that our current presenter is in the guest seat. Colm, as we know, has a business and he's in to talk about it today, so welcome, Colm.
Thank you very much, Brian. I have to say, it feels a little strange being on this side of the counter. But,
on the receiving end of the Inquisition.
Next week, when I have a guest in, I'll feel a little more sympathetic towards them.
Well, I have learned a good deal from your presentation and how you interact with the guests and the positive responses that we get from the guests that appear on your show. So hopefully I can emulate some of the things that you do during your show. But traditionally, you normally ask, who is Colm Colgan? So, Colm, who is
Colm Colgan? That's a very good question. Well, I suppose Colm Colgan's business I started in the mid-70s. Strange enough, in the middle of another recession. I was looking for one job, couldn't get it, and a sister-in-law of mine got me in as a messenger boy. I don't think there's such a thing anymore, but a messenger boy in a shipping company. It's a company called LEP International in Tara Street in Dublin. And I was the messenger boy going up. It was a shipping company, and it was up and down the docks. And then I moved from there to another shipping company. And then I think in total I worked for 4 shipping companies. And then I said to myself, this is a doddle, I could do this myself. So I set up my own business with about as much planning as you do in the back of a packet of cigarettes. But somehow I managed to keep it going for maybe about 10 months. I'm literally hand to mouth.
On a wing and a prayer.
On a wing and a prayer. Then a couple of things fell together, and then we start making a few bob on it.
But you would have learned a lot from, because that shipping was a completely different business in those days than it is now. It's more automated but you would have been at the coal face. So you'd have, even though you said that you were a particular role, but you still would have learned a lot. Oh God,
it's completely different now. As I said, I was the messenger boy, and from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock I was on my trusty Honda 50 up and down to the docks, to Chambers of Commerce, getting more forms stamped. The simplest of import and the simplest of export back then created a mountain of paperwork. Now, as you know, you can move anything within DEC without any paperwork. You just throw it in the back of a lorry and it's here the next day. But back then, the amount of paperwork was absolutely incredible.
But sometimes people forget that the borders that time, both the sea borders and the land borders, there was an enormous amount of paperwork. There were queues. Sometimes if the paperwork wasn't right, stuff could be delayed for days. So there would have been a lot of activity, especially in the line of work that you were doing.
Absolutely. As I said, I decided to do this myself, and we set ourselves up as a customs clearance agent, which means we did the paperwork for a lot of the trucks coming in. And like you say, there was some trucks, if there was a problem, you were talking hours. If it was a severe problem, it was days. And thankfully none of them that I was involved in, but there was some trucks that would be there literally for weeks. They would be from what's now part of the EU, but it would be in the old Central Europe. They would come over and they would be missing some sort of documentation. They wouldn't have a word of English to drive us. We wouldn't have a word of Hungarian. You'd get onto the Hungarian company and they wouldn't be able to understand. Then you could find out what it was. Then nobody could figure a solution. So the driver could literally be sitting down at the docks for weeks.
And that could be stuff that both industry and commerce would have been waiting for. Maybe a manufacturing plant wanting some piece of important equipment and holding up the whole process costing thousands. So you're setting up the handling company, or would have somewhat eased that a good bit.
Yeah, you tried, you did. Now, having said that, nothing was as efficient as it is now. I remember the first shipping agency that we set up, we had a weekly container from London. So if you collected something on a Monday, it sat in the depot until Friday, and then on Friday it was all loaded on the container. The container came into Dublin on Monday. It then had to be taken to a customs yard to be stripped. But of course it went on a queue. So it might have been Wednesday before the goods came out of it. Right. So delays of 2 weeks for a package from Dublin. From London to Dublin wouldn't have been unheard of, and life carried on. I suppose there were simpler times, there were slower times, there wasn't as much panic.
Yeah, and while the single border through the EU would have had a lot of benefits for industry, but it would also have seen the demise of the line of work that you were in.
Absolutely. On the 31st of December 1992, there was a need for customs clearance agents. The following day, trucks just rolled through, and it was literally like that. Now, in the late 80s, when we knew this was coming, we set up an organisation of customs clearance agencies, and we lobbied TDs here in Ireland. We lobbied international MEPs. We had meetings in Brussels. But at the end of the day, it came in, and we weren't trying to stop it coming in, but we were saying, well, look, these are people, and again, I had started it in '82, and so I was at it probably about 10 years. But there was kind of men, and I suppose at that stage, what was I, in my early 30s? There was men there in their 60s, and back then, when you were in your 60s, you were just about ready to shuffle off and maybe live on whatever the business was generating that somebody else was going to run for you. All that was gone, but it came in, and I suppose, not unlike some of our rural brethren, we were probably looking for some compensation, but we got nothing.
Yeah.
And
but that also brought opportunities as well in other areas. So it meant that people had to diversify and to think outside the box in some degree. So it would have probably brought you into a new field of work or given you new opportunities.
Absolutely. Looking back on it, yes, it was a bit of an opportunity, but I had to sit down and say, well, what can I do? And I was thinking about weirdest and wonderful of ideas. And a friend of mine, actually, it's also my brother-in-law, has a pre-packaging company. He packs electrical accessories for shops around the country. And I said, why don't you try something like that? So we designed a bit of a logo ourselves, and we decided we'd hone in on TV leads. So after a couple of months knocking on doors, we were supplying TV leads to probably every TV shop in Dublin, which was great because there was probably about maybe 40 TV shops in the greater Dublin area.
Was the cable starting at that time and a few other things that would have aided that? It
was, yeah. But what we found was that we were in most of the shops because we were unusual. It was packed, it was neat, there was labels, everything else was kind of loose up to that. So we had most of the TV shops in Dublin, but maybe they were buying £20 and £30 worth of leads a month off us. When you added it up and the cost of packaging, that wasn't kind of putting bread on the table. So we slowly but surely added to that range. We did electrical accessories. And then we went into ventilation again in the exact same format. We buy them loose, we pre-packed them, and we sold them. And then the building boom came in the kind of mid 2000s, whatever the first decade of it was, 2005, 2006. We used to do a lot of ventilation accessories. We'd go into housing estates, and we would have customers that would say, right, how many is in a box? And we said, well, it actually comes on a pallet. It's probably 100 on a pallet. Right, take the pallet, grand, no problem at all. Those same customers now tell you, how many is in a box? Well, there's 5 in a box. Well, I only want 2. So there's
a different market landscape now, and people are more conscious of their overheads and their costs.
I suppose as are we, because we used to import a lot of the stuff from the UK. We'd buy it in bulk. Now we buy as we need it, for the simple reason that we were still, because the downturn started to happen to us in 2008. But unfortunately our sales didn't fall off a cliff, and I wish they did, because if they had fallen off a cliff, we probably would have sprang into action and done something. But over the years, slowly but surely, market share was being eroded, profit margins were being eroded, and you were trying everything and anything to keep it going. As I said, we went from buying pallet loads from the UK and storing them to buying them locally, obviously dear, and in smaller quantities.
Yeah, but also known from the different discussions that you have had here in the studio and through the chamber, that you would have had involvement with community radio in Dublin, plus you'd have also been on some other of the social type of scenes in Dublin, but you'd have learned a lot of communication skills from that, which would probably help you in your business.
Well, I suppose they were connected, because yes, ever since I was a teenager, I suppose performing, radio, DJ, MC was something I'd always done. Even to quite recently, if there was an event that had come up, people would say, "Well, I'm arranging to sell the tickets. I'm arranging to get the transport." God, who? Colm, yeah, he'll MC it, what have you. It is something that I had done. I suppose to an extent it came naturally to me, but also from a business point of view, I had any opportunity run by Plato or run by the County Enterprise Board or City Enterprise Board when I was in Dublin to do any presentation course at night, and I always snapped them up. People used to say, "But you've already done something like this," you know. And I said, "But it was the one thing that I loved doing, and I never missed the opportunity." So over the years.
But you'd have stopped short from, say, some of the politicians that are renowned for the go to the opening of an envelope. You stopped short of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And of course, you're a card-carrying member of the present government. I have to sort of stress that, because you've mentioned it a number of times. You'd have been conscious of the political, but you never opted into the full political.
Well, as you say, I'm a card-carrying member of Fine Gael. I had been a Fine Gael supporter probably since the early 80s, when it was a choice between Garrett the Good and Charlie the Chancellor, and I went for Garrett the Good, and that's who I voted for, and that was it. It was actually only since I came up to Cavan, when I moved up here in 2004, that I actually joined the Fine Gael party for the first time. And I suppose the fact that, you know, we had local councillors in Dublin that you never saw at the TD, you'd kind of have to make an appointment to see. Whereas a local TD, Joe Riley, you see him in the bar, you see him when you're going to Mass, you see him in the shops. Very approachable. The same with our local councils. I got to know them all personally before I became a member of the party. Now, when you are talking 2004, which was just after the disastrous 2002 election, so there was no political advantage then, nor is there now, I have to say, to from a business point of view, to being involved in politics. It's just something I always liked.
Right, well, that's enlightening, of course, and unfortunately we have to go to a commercial break, and in part two we'll come back to Colm with his current business. He's moved to Baileboro and he has a business based in Baileboro, so we'll deal with that in part two.